We talk a lot on the Productivity Show about doing your morning routines, your planning, weekly planning, daily planning, quarterly planning, that sort of thing. But the question is, how do you know what to do and how do you do it in the most efficient way? Like for myself, another example of this is the GTD weekly review. We've done episodes on that in the past as well. And I always struggled being consistent with my GTD weekly review. And part of it is because I needed to find the right time and location. But the other part of it is then I would sit down to do it and I just have to figure out what to do every time. So now I've turned it into a checklist and I sit down with my coffee at Starbucks on Sunday morning, fire up my GTD weekly review checklist, which I have in my OmniFocus, my task manager, and I just go through it. I don't need to think about what I need to do. I just sit down, open my laptop, grab my paper notebook, and go into pure execution mode. And it's made a really big difference. And the thing about using checklists for these is it helps solve two problems with being consistent with doing reviews and doing planning. Number one is, of course, actually doing it. And number two is making sure that you're doing the right thing. And a checklist can help with both of these because it reduces the friction of getting started. I don't know about you, Tam, but for me, that is always like a big point of friction for me for doing this type of thing is actually getting started to do it. And having a checklist that you don't need to think about, you just need to follow makes a big difference for that. And number two, doing the right things, since everything is there on the checklist, it's like the minimum required things, you're way less likely to skip important steps. Examples of checklists that we recommend, and Tan, I'm curious which of these you use. Number one is a rise ritual. So that's your ritual for when you start your day. Number two is a shutdown ritual, and that is the checklist for the ritual you have when you're ending your day. And then the GTD weekly review, like I talked about, and also for doing your planning, your quarterly, your monthly, your weekly, and your daily plan. If you have checklists for those, it's way more likely that you're actually going to do these things. How about you, Tan? What kind of ritual and planning templates do you use?
Yeah, I have all of these. And one thing I've noticed is if I stop using them for a while, so let's say, for example, I skip my morning routine for, let's say, a week or two, then I might forget what the actual steps are to get back on track. And so if I'm trying to solve that problem again, I might have to do some research and then read a blog post or listen to a podcast episode again to get re-inspired of what I want to do. Or if I had a checklist, then I don't have to solve that problem again. When you have a checklist in place, you're not trying to solve problems, you're trying to execute. That's two different things. And it saves so much time and energy. And something we talk about in our 25X program all the time is we want to have as many routines and rituals in place and ideally checklists to keep us on point so that we don't have to think about it. We just do. And the more we can do, the better off we are. So another way I always tell people about this is if you're willing to invest 20 minutes to create a checklist, then future you is going to really love you for it. And you are probably going to win back 5 minutes every single time you execute that checklist. Doesn't it kind of make sense? Doesn't the ROI make sense to do this then? Spend 20 minutes to get 5 minutes back here, 5 minutes back there. If you do it once a week, let's say you do it even just maybe imperfectly 40 times. So 40 times 5 is like 200 minutes. So that's roughly 3.5 hours a year. I think that's totally worth it. Checklists are very high leverage. And so if you're willing to spend a little bit of time upfront to create them, you're going to be benefiting from it over and over again. Because yeah, you're going to save time, but also two, you're more likely to follow through. So your momentum is not going to get lost. So if you ever do fall off track, it's easier to get back on track because you don't have to think and trying to solve a problem. You already have it figured out because you did all the heavy lifting and thinking way beforehand. So another lesson I've learned from all of this is the best time to solve a problem is when you're not in a critter state, when you're like angry or emotional or like you're upset. Like that's the worst time to solve a problem. The best time to solve a problem is when you're calm, collected, focused. And then if you're willing to spend 20 minutes on creating that checklist, then anytime you're not feeling that great, or you're a little tired, or you're like not feeling the best, you can still follow through on the checklist because it's relatively easy to do and execute. And so I would encourage everybody to create that checklist. And so I would ask you, what's one checklist that you can create today? Write that down right now and create a checklist today. Spend about 15, 20 minutes or so, even if it's just imperfect, like bullet points in a Google Doc or something. That's way better than having nothing at all.